By the rivers of Babylon, yeah, we sat down and we cried when we remembered Jerusalem. We were sick, Lord, near to dying. By the rivers of Babylon, yeah, we sat down and we cried when we remembered Jerusalem. We were sick, Lord, near to dying.
Shalom, shalom. Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. We are about to start the program today. Thank you all for coming. This lecture series is a part two, in essence, to the first Valley of the Dry Bones, which happened last year, and we wanted to make sure we made the effort to close out the series today. So we thank you for your participation, and we would like to start with opening prayer. Chief Rabbi Binyamin.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. We thank you, Jehovah God, for our lives. We thank you for strength and good health and the opportunity to call upon your name on this day and at this time. And asking that your presence would be here with us, and that you would bless us, that you would give us knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, and that you would guide us in the direction and the path that we should walk before you. We thank you for allowing us to have this opportunity here, and we ask that you bless us to be fruitful, that you will allow everyone that is here to be blessed, and that as they arrive there safely, to arrive to their home safely once again at the conclusion of this event. We thank you for watching over us day by day and making sure that we are sustained with food, shelter, and clothing. So once again, we do ask that you would provide us with the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding necessary to carry on with our lives, that you bless the works of our hands, that you would allow us to work together as a community and build ourselves up to be the nation that you intended us to be. We thank you for all of your blessings and all the things that you give us, and blessed be your holy name forever. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
Amen. Rabbi. How's everybody doing out there today? Hallelujah. So, before I call up the first speaker, the lecturer for this series, I just want to give you a brief on what this is. So, oftentimes, our people are bombarded with a lot of different issues that they are unaware of. And we don't come together to really make a strong effort on tackling the issues that we deal with as a community. Oftentimes we don't know. We don't know the things that the government has for us down the pipeline. We don't know the things that our enemies have for us coming down the pipeline. And we have to be aware of these things, because that's the only way you can make a sound decision, is if you have the knowledge of it. The Most High says in a prophecy that our people are destroyed for lack of knowledge, and because we have rejected knowledge, he has rejected us. And the reason why we are rejected is because it's not that the information is not out there, we just refuse to get it and grab hold of it, and when we get it, we do nothing with it. So these days we are working on these workshops, not just lectures, but workshops. So at the end of this lecture, we want to know what ideas you have, because we have a series of solutions that may come up, but this is just our opinions. But what do you have in store? What do you know that you can do to help stave off some of the problems we're having with miseducation, with the AIDS epidemic, with mass incarceration? We need everybody's input and everybody's ideas. Long ago, those days of one person thinking for everybody is gone. We need people to think for the people. We need everybody to put their hand in to make sure that the solution or the proper solution is given to the problems that we have. Because the enemy is not stopping, so why should we? Every day you come, you see something new is changing. Trump, he is part of the essence of what American thinking is. Not logical, but they're thinking out of fear and emotion, and you elect somebody to protect you from your fear. And in that fear, he's going to be cutting back this and cutting back social service programs, cutting back student aid, cutting back this, cutting back that, to satisfy a population that is not going to make this country better. But if you decided to invest in those people that you never invested in, you can get new ideas, new thoughts, new innovations to bring this country forward. But they refuse it because they still want to exist in a race-based system, which we'll cover throughout this lecture as well. So what we have to do is make sure we protect ourselves from it. And our unity is our protection. Our togetherness is our protection. Coming out to events like this is our protection. It's the way that we come together, and at the end when we do question and answer or input or testimony, feel free to raise your hand and give any thought to what we need to do, because as organizations, Amzadik, which is a nonprofit, and D.C.B, which is also a nonprofit, we work to try to make things happen within our community. We're not going to be one of those Israelite organizations that stand around and just preach love and worship all day. These things are good. The Most High needs His praise, but His praise is through service. His praise is through the efforts and the work that you put out in the community to make changes within the people who don't know. That's how they do know, because they see the hand of God working in their life through the people of God. And we have to begin to reestablish that type of work within our people, amongst our people, and in our community. So with that, I would like to bring on the first speaker for today, our brother, Rabbi Binyamin ben Binyamin. Hallelujah.
Giving all praise and honor to the creator of the heavens and the earth, the God of the universe, and thanking Him for the opportunity to be here at this time, and thanking everybody that attended here this day. And as the introductions that was stated by Chief Naftali Bandan said, is that, we're here to dialogue. It's set up in a lecture style, but we're here to dialogue. And everybody that's here today is privy to the information that is going to be given today by both speakers. So the reason why you're here today is because you have an involvement in the community, or you have an involvement in the nation. So you're not here just to receive, but you're here to give as well. And it just shows that by the attendance here that you come in to give something of yourselves as well. So this event was titled "The Valley of the Dry Bones, the State of Black America." Now, when people think of Valley of the Dry Bones, where does that concept come from? From anybody that's in the room right here.
Ezekiel 37.
It says Ezekiel 37, because the Valley of Dry Bones is a popular theme that, as long as you have some sort of theology, you would know that thing. And as it was stated, it comes from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37. So we're going to start just discussing the first two verses of that chapter, and then lead into our discussion of today. So it begins by saying the hand of Jehovah, or the hand of Yahweh, and we won't get into a theological discussion on the pronunciation of the name now, but another time, on a later date. But the hand of Jehovah was upon me, and Jehovah carried me out in the spirit, and set me down in the midst of the valley, and it was full of bones, and He caused me to pass by them round about, and behold, they were very many. In the open valley, and lo, they were very dry. So once again, the concept of the Valley of the Dry Bones comes from this very chapter that is in the Bibles that everybody that's in some sort of theology reads today. So just want to give a background of where that came from. So now, when you think of bones, what are bones useful for? Because we just want to get an idea of the concept of, basically, it is a vision that the Creator gave to the prophet Ezekiel. So it wasn't something that actually happened, but when you said that He carried him out to the valley, it was a vision. But just to get to the background, what are bones useful for? Anybody?
So, for to build, they have the blood marrow in it.
The bone marrow.
They provide the structure for the muscles to work around, holds the body up.
Provide the structure.
Structure and support.
Okay, so we got a couple things. So basically the bones, they support our bodies. So when you have a valley of the dry bones, then basically you have a bunch of people that have no support at this time. So the body is broken down. Bones also provide movement, because without the bones, that, it's a skeletal structure that allows us to move about. And it protects our organs as well. The organs, which are the vital parts of our body that provide, particular functions. And bones, they store vital minerals as well. Calcium is a major mineral that is stored in our bones. And as it was said also that through the bones, you have the bone marrow, which produces the red blood cells, and that's how oxygen is transferred through the body, and carbon dioxide is transferred outside of the body. So what does it really mean? Because once again, this is titled The Valley of the Dry Bones, the State of Black America. So how does this form of the Valley of the Dry Bones, or the concept of the Valley of Dry Bones, relate to what Black America needs? And the concept of race will be discussed later, but once again, we're just dealing in a general term that everybody knows when we talk about Black America, or the black race in America. But once again, we'll get into the discussion of race later on. So in relation to what bones are for and what Black America needs, for our support of the body, we need a foundation. So we need our stability. We need something that's going to hold us together. And with provide movement, we need some sort of advancement. So once we have that foundation, now we can move forward, because we're not supposed to be in a stagnant state. As we grow from infants into adults, our bone structure grows with us, but it allows us to move forward. So in terms of Black America, we need some sort of advancement. We need some sort of movement so that we don't stay stagnated in the same place we always are. And as the bones protect our organs, what Black America needs is some sort of protection for our functions, because once again, each organ has a function within the body, and the bones protects those organs, so we need to protect our functionality. We have to have separate functions within the Black community, and we need protection for all of it in order for it to survive. Right. And as the bones store vital minerals, we need economic resources, because the minerals are basically resources. So that's what they would call Black Americans. We need some sort of economic resources in order to move forward. And also, as the red blood cells carry the oxygen through the body and carbon dioxide out, as Black Americans, quote unquote, we need to be able to transmit this information and the resources that we have all throughout the community, so it doesn't just stay in one place. And that's where it leads up to our advancement and our movement. So now, when we think of Black America, what do we think of today? Because once again, it's entitled The State of Black America. What do we think of when we think of Black America today? Anybody? Poverty. Anyone else?
Think of just general Black people in America. Just like politically. Anyone else? What do you think of when you think of the term the State of Black America? What does that really, how does that stand out in your mind? So we heard poverty, not unified. We heard poverty, a political structure, identity crisis. So we're going to get basically into talking about the state of Black America at this point, which is once again the major topic of discussion. And also, I have here, and it'll show up here, that in the minds of most people, this is the state of Black America right here, which is this painting right here. And I just have to give credit to the painter, whose name is Katya Joseph. She participated in a Black-owned business expo put on by Kyle Events, along with Chief Nazi Bendan, who will be speaking later today. So in this painting, it reflects what most people may think of when they think of Black America. And what you see within it, number one, you see the American flag is turned upside down. And within there, you see the names of people that were gunned down, primarily by police. So once again, when people think of Black America, this is what they think of. That we're, as along with everybody says here, that, we shot down, we're being torn down from outside forces. And an interesting thing about this painting, it mentions all of the names here, from Walter Scott on the top to Michael Brown on the bottom. But then you see that there were certain letters that are written in red. And what the painter did, what the artist did was basically say that we are not target practice when you look at all of that. So once again, that's what a lot of people think of when they think of Black America, of us being shot down and us being target practice. But the painter is basically saying we're not target practice. So we have to get out of this mind state, and we have to get out of that physical state. So there are things that we have to do to get out of this position. You know, within the painting, it reads the lines like "Land of the free, home of the slaves," and then you also see the image of outline of a person that's shot right there. So once again, this is the image that people think of when they think of the state of Black America, and that relates to one of the topics that you see in the flyer that everybody got when they came here, which relates to police brutality. So now when you think of the state of Black America, there's another thing in there that we're going to talk about right now, which is also in the flyer, which is the Jim Crow situation. Now technically, we're not under Jim Crow laws as of the time. But we're going to see that how Jim Crow laws affect everything that Black Americans go through today. So now, what is Jim Crow? Anybody?
It's a set of local or social laws directed toward Black people to keep them suppressed.
Keep them suppressed. A set of laws that would...
It was a set of laws after Reconstruction that was to keep the Black people suppressed, because at the time during Reconstruction they thought that we had too many rights at that time. So Jim Crow came in then.
Right, so basically Jim Crow, like if you extend it, it's a set of laws, statutes enacted by primarily southern states. There were laws that came towards the northern states of America, but primarily in the South, that began in the late 1870s up to the early 1800s, as it was mentioned, the time of Reconstruction, which is the time after the Emancipation Proclamation, that legalized segregation between African Americans and whites. So it was a legal system, because once slavery was quote unquote abolished, the white slave owners had to deal with the situation of Black people being free in their territory. So there had to be laws that were enacted in order to still make that separation, and it had to be a legal structure. When slavery was abolished, there were amendments that were put in. We'll get into some of those, or one of those amendments later on, but basically between the 13th and the 15th Amendment, it basically made Black people equal to white people. That's basically what those 13th to 15th Amendment did. But basically what these laws, the Jim Crow laws, did was basically put that separation between Black and white. So even though the Constitution, quote unquote, made white and Black equal, these laws still made a separation. So Black people had to go in one direction, white people go in another direction. And once again, these laws were to restrict the rights of African Americans to use public facilities, schools, the rights to vote, to find decent employment, basically excluding African Americans from exercising their rights as citizens of the United States. Because once again, between the 13th and 15th Amendment, voting rights was actually put into place during Reconstruction. We know a lot of us think about the civil rights movement, and that allowed us to have the right to vote, but a lot of Black people got the right to vote right after emancipation. And these laws, the Jim Crow laws, were basically put into place to try to suppress primarily, the access to voting, which we'll discuss a little bit later. So now, the term, Jim Crow, who was Jim Crow, if anybody knows? Character. I mean, that's a quote unquote, or some sort of representation of Jim Crow there. It's alleged that the character came from African folklore. It's alleged. That's just one of the legends behind Jim Crow. And we're just discussing that because the term is thrown around, but we want to discuss actually where did that term come from. So basically, once again, it's alleged that it came from African folklore, but in reality, it was a minstrel character performed by Thomas Dartmouth, who's called Daddy Rice, an American performer and a variety act. Rice made the character Jim Crow famous through his performance. And what he did was basically, people know about blackface. So what he did was, he put on blackface, with burnt cork. He wore the ripped up clothes, because that's how black people were represented back in the late 1800s. And he performed a song and dance minstrel act throughout the country. And one of his favorite songs throughout his performances was called Jump Jim Crow. And that was one of the, once again, what made him famous in America and even in England. And as it says, even in the Boston Post, that in 1838, that the most popular characters in the world at this time were Queen Victoria and Jim Crow. That's how much, and Jim Crow was basically a representation of black people. So when they use the term Jim Crow, they talk about black people. Later on, you get terms like Negro, colored, but originally, one of the terms to represent black people was Jim Crow. So when this performer put on this act, he was representing what white Americans thought that black people looked like and acted like. So now, when we think of Jim Crow laws, this is basically what we, think about, primarily segregation. One in the top left is a Greyhound bus station. We ride Greyhound today, but back in the days, you couldn't ride Greyhound or enter the waiting area, as it says there, at the same location as white people. There was segregation all throughout, and that's what's basically legalized through these Jim Crow statutes, from even washing clothes, restrooms, even for the jobs, as I mentioned there, help wanted, they only wanted white people to work in certain jobs, and even like the water fountain, and waiting area once again. So primarily when we think of Jim Crow laws, we think of the segregation that was enacted as a result of those statutes. And then even here, there was, and it wasn't just relegated to us. Wow. Jewish people were on the same level as us, as we see here, as well as dogs on the left. Then on the right, along with dogs, we have us, again, as they represent us, and Mexicans. So nobody was exempt. And as you go further west, during the late 1800s, early 1900s, Chinese got it, Japanese got it. So basically white Americans wanted to separate from everybody. We know that it was primarily us, and we felt the bulk of the statutes and the lynchings and everything that we're gonna discuss briefly, but everybody was in on it. So Jewish people today gotta remember their past, because they were in the same position as we were. And as the Mexicans, they're feeling it today, as was mentioned earlier, that the new President Trump, has this verbal attack on Mexicans. But this is going back, when he talks about making America great, it's going back to where it was in the late 1800s, where everybody was separated from white America. But what's interesting about trying to separate the Mexicans is that this is the original Mexico. Well, one of the original maps of Mexico back in 1847.
That's right.
1847, California, Arizona, New Mexico was part of Mexico. It wasn't part of the United States. Go back even a little further, just a little bit further, 9 years. 1838, Texas was part of Mexico. So if you really want to talk about building a wall and making America great and going back, get rid of some of those states that are right there. But we digress, and just getting back to Jim Crow. So now, we're just going to talk about Jim Crow etiquette. Not really the law so much, but there was a certain etiquette, certain things that, black people knew that they were just supposed to do, and the way that they were supposed to act. So a black male couldn't offer his hand to shake the hands of a white male, socially, for whatever reason. That was etiquette. Blacks and white were not supposed to eat together. And if they did eat together in the same location, whites would serve first, and there was some sort of partition between the blacks and the whites. Also, under no circumstance was a black male to offer to light the cigarette of a white female. That gesture implied intimacy. Because once slavery was abolished, and you read throughout the history, there was this idea of the black male that wanted to attack white women and wanted to rape white women. That there was this ideal that black males just had so much sexual energy that they couldn't control themselves, and that was the fear that was instilled on their daughters to keep them separate from us. And there were laws that were such as this to make sure that we were kept separate from them. Also in etiquette, blacks were not not allowed to show public affection towards one another. So not only in public you can't show or extend your hand to a white person, black people were not allowed to show affection, like a husband and wife were not allowed to show affection to one another in public. And it also prescribed that blacks were introduced to whites, never whites to blacks. So for example, Mr. Peters, who's a white person, would say, "This is Charlie, the black person that I spoke to you about." But the introduction wouldn't be vice versa. And also, whites did not use courtesy titles of respect when referring to blacks. For example, Mr., Mrs., Miss, Sir, and Ma'am were not used towards us. So think about generations of white people thinking this way towards black people, not even addressing us in a form of respect. So when we think about the state of black America today, a lot of this is ingrained on both sides. So both black and white suffer from these Jim Crow statutes that were enacted back in the days. Also, a black person who rode in a car driven by a white person, the black person sat in the back seat on the back of a truck, which is something that, we know about all throughout our history, that there was always a separation, even in travel, especially once the rail cars started becoming popular. They had separate rail cars for white and black. And even when driving, white motorists always had the right of way at intersections. So much for the four-way stop sign. If you pulled up first and the white person pulled up after, you got to give them the right of way. And that was a law. And you would get a ticket if you didn't yield the right of way in the road to a white person, to a white motorist. But in reality, other than the segregation, this is what Jim Crow led to. The lynchings that we see here, that we see in the pictures. They weren't technically legalized, but they were a result of that separation and that fear that was instilled within white people towards black people, that they had to basically get rid of them from their territories because they could no longer enslave us, so they had to figure out a way to get rid of us. But they couldn't get rid of us completely and just ship us wherever they felt like it, because the Constitution made it legal that everybody's the same status. So as a result, these are the things that happen. But when you have that separation, when you have the segregation, and when you have police forces that are not your own, nobody's gonna justify you in any case. So therefore, lynchings became rampant. And as mentioned earlier, one of the goals of the Jim Crow laws was to make sure that we didn't vote. Because right after, once again, the Emancipation Proclamation, there were a lot of black people that voted, and there were a lot of black people that entered into politics, a lot of black people that became senators in the South. And that became fearful to white people. So that was one of the reasons why the laws were enacted to make that separation, and also lynchings were put in order to instill fear in black people, as it says in the bottom one, that person voted, so therefore that person was lynched because he voted. So now, there's a precursor to the Jim Crow statutes, which are the black codes. Anybody know what the black codes are? Anybody? So the precursor, this is basically a follow-up of what they were called slave codes, but this is the precursor to black codes. The precursor to Jim Crow laws, because these codes were actually abolished once Reconstruction period was in motion. So therefore, a lot of these things were once again abolished. But these are the codes that actually entered into Jim Crow statutes. So basically, the black codes are, in U.S. history, any number of laws enacted in the states of the former Confederacy after the American Civil War and intended to assure the continuance of white supremacy. They were enacted in 1865 and 1866. The laws were designed to replace the social controls of slavery that had been removed by the Emancipation Proclamation and the 13th Amendment of the Constitution. This is not my definition. This is the definition of Encyclopedia Britannica that said that. So if it sounds powerful, you got to take it up with them. And because once again, this was right after slavery was abolished that they decided to put these codes into effect. So going to talk about the 13th Amendment, which basically abolished slavery by saying that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Now, there's a line that's there in bold for a reason. The line, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. So basically, in the South, what the former white slave owners saw was an out to get black people back into slavery.
That's right.
Because it says that except for punishment of crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. So anybody, doesn't matter what race they come from, anybody convicted of a crime can go back into the slavery that they just remembered took place the year before. So basically they had to figure out a way to utilize this loophole. So, and also Section 2 says Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So just going back to some of the black codes that were within that time period right after the abolition of slavery, that race was defined by blood. The presence of any amount of black blood made one black. So even if a person, well basically what it's saying, anybody that had a drop of black blood, it made them black and subject to these black codes. So employment was required by all freedmen. Violators faced vagrancy charges. Vagrancy was something that right after slavery got a lot of our people put back into slavery. Because a lot of people, once you had to have a job. And if you couldn't prove that you had a job, you would be locked up and sent back to slavery in some form. It may not have been the full form that we know with the chains and shackles, which did happen, but it was some sort of imprisonment. There was a thing called convict leasing, where they would, states, or even within states, counties would, basically transport prisoners based on needs and based on work. So basically something that somebody not having a job would be classified as a felony. They would be convicted and be put back into some sort of form of slavery. And freedmen were not allowed to assemble without the presence of a white person. So if there was any gathering of black people anywhere, whether it's a religious gathering, a social gathering, if there was no white person there present, everybody's getting locked up. And these were the codes that were enacted once again right after slavery was abolished and right before the Jim Crow era, right at the institution of the Reconstruction period. Also, there's some more black codes. Freedmen were assumed to be agricultural workers and their duties and hours were tightly regulated. So once you were freed, the only job that they said that you could have is to be an agricultural worker. You couldn't be, it's not listed, couldn't be a barber, couldn't do anything else. You had to be an agricultural worker. So now if there's not enough work or not enough agricultural work, then you become a vagrant and then you get locked up for vagrancy. Freedmen, even some more black codes. If you walk beside a railroad, it's a felony. Loud speech around white women was a felony.
Wow.
You sell farm property after dark. Wow. It's a felony. You spit. It's a felony. Public drinking or public drunkenness. It's a felony. Loitering in public spaces. Felony. Wow. Some of these things we know of today as misdemeanors. So some of these things, once again, we talk about the Jim Crow legislation and how it transferred to today. Because, a lot of times when we get locked up for something and they go in our background, they say that this person has a rap sheet. Sometimes the rap sheet is something simple as public urination, drinking in public, but it's just that they want to put that demeaning character upon us. And once again, all of this started back from the black codes. But these were eventually abolished quickly. Because there was a fight between the North and the South, and everything was, President Lincoln was assassinated, and his successors was fighting to keep the country together, so they got rid of basically the black codes. So now, we dealt with the Jim Crow. So now, what that led to, with everybody getting locked up, is another thing in the flyers called mass incarceration. And that mass incarceration lasted from then, even up until now. And a lot of these laws, a lot of these codes, from that black codes to the Jim Crow statutes, affect us even up until today. And that's why, once again, we face mass incarceration, because the prison systems is a business also. And the business of prisons is to make people in there to work. So they use, once again, that 13th Amendment loophole, get us back in prison, and then we're working for the system once again. And even, this is when we talk about the state of Black America, we think of ourselves as prisoners. And as it even says today, when we look at reality TV, at TV, the orange is the new black. Yeah. So when you think of black people, you think about black people in prison. Even Essence, a black magazine, is behind the statement that orange is the new black. So when you think of black people, you think about people in jail. But it all relates back to black codes, Jim Crow statutes, which leads to our mass incarceration, putting us back in slavery. And now today, we venerate the same people. We venerate people that go to jail. Jail is like a badge of honor for a lot of us. People making money off of it even today. And even off of black women, stereotyping us as being prisoners. Think about how that gets into our minds. Like, they used to say like 30 is the new 20, 40 is the new 30. Right. So now when you think of the new black, you think about the black movement. Orange is the new black movement. Orange jumpsuits. Going to prison is the new black. Think about that concept that they're throwing at us. So now going back to the book of Ezekiel. So it says in verse 3, and he said unto me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I said, my Lord Yehovah, you know. Because the prophet sees all of these bones as depicted on the picture in the background, and the prophet can't figure any way that these bones, and they're dry bones, there's nothing within them. No soundness in them, no spirit within them. He said there's no way that these bones, he doesn't know if these bones could live, so therefore he said that only God knows if these bones could live. So when we think about what is a valley, anybody?
A valley?
Yeah.
It's a space between two mountain ranges.
Right, space between two mountain ranges.
Metaphorically, it's a low point.
It's a low point. So, literally, as it was stated, a low area of land between hills or mountains, typically with a river or stream flowing through it. So, along with the point of it being a low point, it also gives us some sort of hope. Number one, because you have a river or stream flowing through it, which gives us some sort of sustenance. So what can the valley represent? Hope, sustenance, upward mobility, because you're in the valley, but you can look up at the mountain and know that you can get up there. And once you get up there, you can look back and see where you've been, but you know that by looking up, you have something to look forward to. So that's what the valley can represent. So these dry bones that were in the valley, they have the opportunity to return, to get back up their feet. They have hope. The river or the stream or some sort of water going through can provide some sort of sustenance. And just by keeping your sights high, you have some sort of concept of upward mobility. So some of the things that we're going to discuss, some solutions. One of the things that we could do is never forget where we came from. Jewish people never forget the Holocaust. The United States does not forget 9/11. These things happened recently. So why should we ever forget this? So as long as we never forget that, and it's not that we're trying to bring our mind state back to that, but you want to make sure you never get back to that point again. So when they talk about never forgetting the Holocaust, Jewish people make sure that they will never get to the point that somebody could do that to them again. When America thinks of 9/11 and never forgetting that, they think of protecting this land to the point where that could never happen on this land again. So when we think about never forgetting, it's not that we think of ourselves as slaves and that we want to avoid that image in our mind. We want to make sure that we never get back to that point ever again. So one of the things we can do is build our men. So we start with our sons. So we raise our sons, we teach our sons, and make sure that they're led in the right path. Because once again, we're dealing with working on making men. So you start with the sons because they start off as children. You build them up, you teach them the right way, make sure that they're educated, so then they become proper students. So that's how you get them educated, enforcing them, doing good in school, from public school, high school, going into college, and just making advancement in life. That's one of the things that we can do to help the state of Black America move forward. And then what men also become is husbands. So we don't have a bunch of loose men all over the place, but men become husbands. So once you become a husband, you take responsibility for your actions and the responsibility of somebody else. And then it automatically leads to being a father. And one of the main things of being a father is being present. Because presence is something that's lacking in Black America today when it comes to fathers and children. So these are the things that we have to instill within our sons, leading them, once again, to be students, teaching them how to be proper husbands and teaching them how to be proper fathers. And that's how we get out of the cycle that we're in. And we have to change our image. The image that's given to us, we have to make sure that we get that out of our minds and out of the minds of our children and our brothers and sisters. So we can't have these type of images in our minds. So this is the type of image that we have to get out, and this is the type of image we have to put within them. Black doctors. You can show them Black lawyers, successful Black people. These are the images that we have to instill within our people so that therefore they can know that there's a way to have hope, to get out of that valley and to move up on the top of the mountain. Also, we have to build our women. Same process. Start with our daughters. Build them up. Teach them the right way. Teach them what to look out for and what is expected of them. And same thing as with the sons, make them become proper students also. Everybody has the opportunity to become a good student and a good worker, whether it's male or female. So we teach, our daughters to be proper students and go through life properly as well. So they become proper wives eventually, knowing how to be responsible in a family, and of course, becoming mothers. And becoming a mother means that we have to also, within our community, try to lower the abortion rate. Because a lot of the bones, is not in the picture in the back, but a lot of those bones in our valleys come from abortions. We could talk about the mass incarceration, we could talk about police brutality, but abortion has killed millions of Black babies from even the 1970s, even up until today. So we've lost probably more people to abortion than to Black on Black crime, police brutality, and even some of the things that we spoke about earlier today. So when we talk about being, teaching women to, building out women to be mothers, this is the thing we have to instill with them as well. And change the image as well. Because this is the image that they like to show us on TV of what our women are.
Ratchet TV.
But we have to show our daughters this type of image right here. Give them something to look forward to so they're no longer in that valley, but they move up to the top of that mountain. So now we're just gonna deal with, we have to become educated. The economic aspect of what we could do as Black Americans will be touched on later on today. So just wanted to touch on the social aspect, the family aspect. Now we're gonna talk about information because we have to become educated. And that just comes from reading books. So just briefly, I'll just mention some of the resources that were used for the same lecture. Read books, simple books, and once again, this gives you to your sons and your daughters, and when they're going to school, give them these type of books to read. 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro by J.A. Rogers. You could also Babylon to Timbuktu by Rudolph Rensler. Also, Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett. Books such as The ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors by Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. Well, that was the original name. I know her name was changed back. Also, Slavery by Another Name. And once again, this is where a lot of the information came from. And if you don't like to read books, there's a documentary of this for free on the PBS website. But it's always good to read. So once we get to talk about the solutions, we have to get back into reading and becoming informed. But you can watch the 1.5 hour documentary, which covers a lot of topics in this book. And also, The New Jim Crow, which talks about the mass incarceration of our people, written by Michelle Alexander. Also, if you like documentaries, the documentary 13. You can find it on Netflix. If you don't have Netflix, you can find it on the internet somewhere. Get it from somewhere.
Shalom, everybody. I just want to say that I'm also reading a book that's called From Hebrews to Negroes. And it's a book by Ronald Dalton. And it will blow your mind.
Yeah, so we get somebody to write that down and
It's a big book. From Hebrews to Negroes.
So that's another book that that's recommended that we get the name of that and then distribute that as well. And then the namesake for this whole series, The Valley of the Dry Bones, the conditions that face black people in America, another book by Dr. Rudolph Windsor, which speaks about some of the things that we spoke about here today. So now, as we get into the latter part of the prophecy or the vision of Ezekiel, it says, "Then he said unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. Behold, they say our bones are dried up, and our hope is lost, we are clean cut off. Therefore prophesy and say unto them, Thus saith the Lord Jehovah, Behold, I will open up your graves, and cause you to come out of your graves, O my people, and I will bring you to the land of Israel. And you will know that I am Jehovah, when I have opened your graves and caused you to come out of your graves, O my people, and I will put my spirit in you, and you shall live. And I will place in you your own land, and you will know that I, Jehovah, have spoken and performed it, says Jehovah." And what's underlined is, "And I will put my spirit in you, and you shall live." So along with social prosperity, economic prosperity, we need some sort of spiritual prosperity as well in order for us to make progress. So we have to build up our spirituality. So we have to get back to our roots, get back to our God, get back to our way and our culture. Get back to the roots of whether you want to call it African culture or Asian culture or Afro-Asian, but we have to get in touch with who we are and where we really come from and who truly is the creator of the universe. So that's why we have to build up our spirituality. So once again, it's not about our economic progress or our social progress, but above all, we have to build up our spiritual progress as well. And now when I talk about spirituality, I'm not talking about religion. Religion is some sort of system that people made up and cause people to follow, and it does not necessarily lead you to any type of prosperity spiritually. And it definitely doesn't necessarily lead you to any type of prosperity financially, unless you're one of these people. Anybody know who these people are? Because these are some rich people in the world. But these people aren't doing anything for the communities that they're in. So we talk about, I can't pronounce the last name, but he's worth $50 million. He's a preacher in South America. Creflo Dollar's worth $27 million. Not doing anything really for the community, but he's worth $27 million. David on the end, Nigeria, $150 million. Whoa. Actually one of the richest people in the world, actually. Wow. Preacher in Nigeria. But Nigeria, all throughout the country, is living in poverty. And the one in the bottom left, another name I can't pronounce, I don't want to pronounce the name incorrectly. 39 million. Once again, these are people that's on Forbes list by just preaching. T.B. Joshua, worth 10 million. And then T.D. Jakes, one of the richest pastors in America, 147 million. Yeah. Preaching, writing books, doing lectures, movies, but not really helping anybody. So once again, spirituality is not really connected to religion. So we have to uplift our spirituality. So these are the type of images we have to get back to, letting our women know that they have the world within them. So they don't get rid of their babies, they have the world within them. And then our men know they have to give the world to their children. And that's what we have to get back to. So we, once again, just thanking the Most High for this opportunity. And we continue to speak about more of these things that are happening to us. And it's going to be continued, because we have to keep these dialogues going. And we have to keep these lectures going, but it's not all about speaking, we have to actually do. When we rose to our heights as the black people in America is because we did. We could have spoken about the Black Wall Street and things like that, but everybody knows about those things. We have to get back to the essence of what makes us a people and get back to that once again. So thanking the Most High once again for everybody's life that's here and the opportunity to bring forth this information. And once again, as we continue on, we'll have open dialogue for everyone to be able to give us the information that they have as well. So once again, thanking the Most High God and thanking everybody here this day.